I slammed the doors open so hard they rattled against the walls, the sound echoing through the funeral home like a gunshot. Every head turned at once, and there he was, my son, lying pale and still inside the coffin. My throat tore as I shouted, "He's not dead!" Gasps filled the room, sharp intakes of breath like knives in the air. The priest froze mid-gesture, his hand hovering above the prayer book. Mourners whispered in frantic ripples, their black clothes rustling as they leaned toward each other. No one moved closer to me. No one dared. Then her voice cut through it all. Cold, sharp, venomous. My daughter-in-law, dressed in silk darker than night, her lips twisted in a sneer. "Too late, old man," she spat. "Sit down before you embarrass yourself even more." Her words landed like blows, each one meant to strip me of dignity. But I couldn't. I couldn't sit. Because I had seen something no one else wanted to admit. His chest, my boy's chest, had moved. Only once. Barely there. But it was enough. My heart pounded so hard I thought it would break my ribs. I wasn't crazy. Not this time. If you want to know how far this nightmare goes, stay with me. Subscribe now, because stories like mine can happen in any family, when love is ignored and truth is buried too soon. I stepped closer to the coffin, every footstep heavy with the weight of decades as a father. My hands trembled, not from age, but from fear, raw and merciless. I wanted to scream again, to drag him out myself, but I could feel every eye on me, judging. My daughter-in-law adjusted her diamond bracelet, the stones catching the light like a cruel reminder of her power. "Pathetic," she hissed under her breath, but loud enough for the front rows to hear. Her arrogance dripped like poison, staining the air. The priest cleared his throat, tried to steady the room, but his voice faltered. Even he couldn't hide the unease flickering across his face. I caught it. That hesitation. He'd seen it too. He just didn't want to believe. My son's face was waxy, his lips too pale. Yet there was something wrong, something incomplete about the stillness. It didn't look final. It looked like sleep, a terrible, fragile sleep. I clutched the railing of the coffin, my knuckles turning white. My daughter-in-law's hand shot out, nails painted blood red, digging into my arm. "Don't you dare," she whispered, her voice low enough for only me to hear. "Why not?" I rasped, shaking her grip away. "What are you afraid of?" My voice cracked, but it carried through the silence. Mourners shifted uncomfortably, torn between pity and suspicion. Someone muttered behind me, "He's lost his mind." Another agreed, "Poor man, can't let go." Their words stung, but I had no time for shame. Shame didn't matter if my son was still breathing inside that box. My daughter-in-law raised her chin, pearls gleaming against her throat. "You should have stayed home, Harold. You're just making a fool of yourself." Her words sliced through me, but I held my ground. The coffin seemed to breathe with me. Or maybe I imagined it. But then I saw it again. The faintest flutter, a twitch in his fingers. Small, but real. My breath caught in my chest. I opened my mouth to shout, but the priest's booming voice cut across me, louder than before. "Let us pray," he commanded, his tone edged with warning. He wanted control back. He wanted silence. But silence wasn't possible anymore. Not after what I'd seen. My pulse hammered in my ears, drowning out the murmurs around me. I gripped the coffin tighter, my fingertips brushing the polished wood that held my boy captive. A cough echoed from the back of the room. Startling, but then dismissed. People shifted, convinced it was nothing. But my stomach twisted. What if it hadn't been nothing? What if it had come from here, inside? I leaned down, close enough to feel the cold shine of the coffin lid against my forehead. "Son," I whispered, "if you can hear me, fight. Just fight." My daughter-in-law laughed then, a harsh, cruel sound that seemed to rattle the chandeliers. "Look at him," she mocked, spreading her arms to the guests. "The poor fool has finally lost touch with reality." Laughter didn't come from the crowd, only discomfort. No one laughed with her, but no one defended me either. Their silence was its own betrayal. The room grew hotter, thicker, every breath like smoke. My body trembled, not from weakness, but from rage. Rage at her. Rage at their blindness. Rage at the world for letting this moment happen. She leaned close again, lips brushing my ear like a snake's hiss. He's gone, and nothing you do will change that. Her perfume was suffocating, heavy, cloying. It made me sick. But then I saw it. The flicker. His lips parted just the slightest bit, like a whisper too soft to hear. My heart lurched in my chest. I straightened, my voice raw, shaking the silence apart. I saw what no one else will admit, and the entire room turned to stone as I lifted my hand over the coffin, ready to rip the truth out with my own 2 hands. The night before the funeral, my phone rang in the darkness, a call that split the silence like a blade. It wasn't the doctor. It wasn't the priest. It was a nurse, her voice hushed, trembling, as if afraid someone might hear. "Mr. Harold," she whispered, "something isn't right." I sat up in bed, the room spinning. My old hands gripped the receiver so tight it nearly cracked. "What do you mean?" I pressed, desperate. She hesitated, fumbling for words, then said, "Your son. There were signs, but they told us to stop looking." And before I could ask, the line went dead. I called back immediately, but no one answered. Just endless ringing, swallowed by the dark. My chest ached with dread. It wasn't just grief anymore. It was suspicion. Someone wanted silence, and they wanted it fast. I couldn't shake the feeling that my boy's life had been stolen early. I barely slept. Every creak of the house sounded like footsteps. Every shadow seemed like a threat. I stared at the clock ticking past midnight, the sound mocking me, each second wasted while my son might still be fighting for air. Time was slipping through my fingers like water. At dawn, I went back to the hospital. Nurses avoided my eyes, whispering in corners. The doctor barely glanced at me, muttering cold words. "It's over. You must accept it." But his eyes darted away too quickly, his jaw too tight. Lies live in small gestures, and I saw them all. I walked into the room where my son had been declared gone. The bed was stripped, sheets folded tight, as if he'd never been there. But I remembered. I remembered the night before, when I'd sat by his side, clutching his hand, refusing to let go. And then it happened. His hand twitched. Just once. Small. Almost nothing. But real. My heart nearly burst from my chest. I squeezed, calling his name, but the nurse rushed in, yanking me back. "Reflex," she snapped. "It means nothing." Her eyes betrayed her, though. She knew. She was afraid. I begged for more time. I demanded they check again. Machines, monitors, anything. They brushed me off like an old fool clinging to fantasies. My words meant nothing against their cold stares. My son's life, reduced to paperwork signed too soon. I carried that twitch with me. I carried it like a secret, too heavy to bear. It haunted me through the night, louder than the ticking clock, louder than the silence of the empty house. That movement was proof, and they were burying it along with him. When I arrived at the funeral home, I still had the hospital bracelet, the one they cut from his wrist and tossed aside. I picked it up, felt its plastic ridges between my fingers. It wasn't just a bracelet. It was a reminder that he was still tethered to this world. I wanted to show it to someone. Anyone. But the moment I opened my hand, my daughter-in-law snatched it from me, glaring. "Trash!" she hissed, snapping it in two. The sound was sharp, final, like bones breaking. My stomach turned at her cruelty. That night's call echoed louder in my head. The nurse had tried to warn me, but someone silenced her. I wondered if she was safe. I wondered if she was still alive. My daughter-in-law had influence, money, reach. People like her made others vanish in silence. I sat alone, drowning in doubt, until the memory pushed back stronger. That twitch, that impossible, undeniable twitch. You can't fake the spark of life. Not like that. I clung to it, as if holding on to my own heartbeat. I tried to tell my brother, my cousins, anyone who would listen. They looked at me with pity, shaking their heads. "You're grieving," they said. "You're imagining things." I wanted to scream. But grief doesn't invent truths. It blinds to them. I was the only one who could see clearly. And then the call came again. Same number. Same hush. "Mr. Harold," she whispered, "don't trust them. Don't trust her. Your son isn't—" And then static. Cut. Gone. My blood froze. Someone was watching her, silencing her every time she tried to speak. I rushed to the funeral home that night, breaking into the chapel. I pressed my ear to the coffin, my hands shaking, my heart begging. Nothing. Only the sound of wood and silence. But still, I refused to believe. That twitch burned in me like fire. Morning came. The black cars lined the street, people gathering with solemn faces. My daughter-in-law strutted in diamonds, her heels striking the floor like nails in a coffin. She owned the room, owned the whispers, owned the lie. But I owned the truth. I saw him move. And nothing she did, nothing she said, could erase that moment from my memory. That's why I screamed at the coffin. That's why I defied them all. Because I wasn't crazy. I was the only one sane enough to fight. The nurse's warning became my anchor. She risked everything to reach me. Why would she do that if there wasn't more? Why risk her career, her life, if not to tell me something vital? I couldn't ignore it. I walked closer to the coffin that morning, my hand brushing the polished wood. The crowd shifted uncomfortably. Whispers slithered through the air. Poor old man. He can't accept it. They didn't see my son's twitch. They didn't hear that call. My daughter-in-law leaned against the casket, her fingers caressing it possessively. "He's gone," she said, her voice cold as ice. "And you will let him go." Her perfume stung my nose, heavy, suffocating, like poison. But I leaned closer, ignoring her sneer. I pressed my ear against the coffin. My breath caught in my throat. And then, there it was, a sound. Faint, fragile, but real. I froze, every nerve in my body screaming. My son, my boy, the faintest echo of life. And in that instant, I knew. He wasn't gone. He was calling me. And I would never stop fighting until they all heard it too. Because the coffin wasn't silent. It never was. It was breathing. And I was the only one who dared to listen. The air in the wake felt heavier than stone, pressing on my chest as I walked between rows of mourners. Their eyes followed me, not with sympathy, but with suspicion. They whispered behind lace veils and black hats, branding me as the old fool who refused to accept death. My daughter-in-law stood near the casket, tall and elegant in her tailored black dress. Diamonds glittered on her ears, catching every flicker of candlelight. She wasn't mourning. She was performing. She played the grieving widow like a stage role, but her eyes burned with something colder than loss. When I reached for the coffin, she snapped the lid shut so hard it echoed through the hall. The crowd gasped, but no one dared stop her. She turned, smiling sweetly at the guests, then hissed at me under her breath. "Closed. Forever closed. You will not shame me again." "Why?" I demanded, my voice breaking. "Why can't I see him? Why can't I say goodbye?" Her lips curled into a sneer. "Because you've lost your mind, Harold, and I won't let you spread your madness here." Her words dripped venom, and the guests nodded, as if she'd bewitched them. I wanted to scream that I'd heard him, that faint sound, soft as a sigh, coming from within the coffin. But when I opened my mouth, the whispers drowned me out. Poor old man. Delusional. Their pity cut deeper than knives, because it meant they would never believe me. I reached into my pocket and felt it. The hospital bracelet. The last thing my son wore before they declared him gone. Its plastic edges dug into my palm. It was my proof, my tether to the truth. I clutched it so hard my hand trembled. She noticed. Her eyes flicked to my fist. "Still clinging to garbage?" she sneered. "That bracelet is nothing. He is nothing now." And with a cruel smile, she plucked her wineglass from the table, raising it in a mock toast. "To the dearly departed." The glass clicked against her ring, a hollow, mocking sound. Laughter rippled softly among her friends. My stomach turned. My son wasn't a toast. He wasn't a performance. He was alive. And I was the only one who still fought for him. I tried again, desperate. "He's breathing," I said, my voice low but steady. I heard him. I know what I heard. The room went silent for a moment, all eyes landing on me. My daughter-in-law broke it with a cruel laugh. "Delirium," she said. "It's a pity, really." She placed a hand on my shoulder. Then, soft but suffocating, "Let go, Harold," she whispered, her perfume choking me. "Let him go." Her words were sharp enough to cut, but her nails dug in deeper, reminding me of her control. I pushed her hand away. The bracelet slipped from my fingers, falling to the floor with a faint clatter. The sound echoed louder in my ears than it should have, like a signal. I bent down, picked it up, and held it high. "This," I said, my voice shaking, "isn't garbage. It's proof." The guests shifted, restless, avoiding my eyes. None would meet my gaze. None would stand beside me. My daughter-in-law smirked, her teeth gleaming white as pearls. "Proof of nothing. You're clinging to plastic like it's salvation. Pathetic." Her insult landed like a slap, but I refused to flinch. I looked down at the bracelet again, tracing its ridges with my thumb. The faint smell of antiseptic still lingered on it. My son had worn this. He had breathed with this wrapped around his wrist. It was more than plastic. It was a heartbeat captured in silence. Her laughter cut through the air again. "Look at him, clutching trash like it's holy. Maybe we should bury him with the bracelet. Maybe then he'll finally rest." The crowd chuckled nervously, unwilling to defy her. Every word she spoke bent them further to her will, but I couldn't bend. I wouldn't. I stared at the coffin, my chest heaving. "He's alive," I whispered, my voice almost lost in the noise. No one listened. No one cared. Yet the conviction in my bones grew stronger with every passing second. I leaned close to the coffin, my ear brushing the polished wood. My daughter-in-law gasped, scandalized. "Get away from there!" she shrieked, her voice shrill. But I ignored her. I pressed harder, shutting my eyes, blocking out everything but the sound. And then I heard it, faint, fragile, like a feather caught in the wind. A sound so soft it could have been mistaken for imagination. But it wasn't. It was real. My son. My boy. The breath of life trapped inside the box. My knees buckled under me, but my heart soared. I wanted to shout, to tear the lid open. But the widow's hand gripped my collar, yanking me back. "Stop this madness," she snapped. "You will not humiliate me again." Her fury only proved what I already knew. She was hiding something. She wanted the coffin shut, the room silent, the truth buried deeper than the grave. But I wouldn't let her. Not now. Not ever. The guests muttered again, their whispers crawling along the walls. Some pitied me. Some feared me. None joined me. I stood alone against her sneer, my son's life balanced on the edge of belief and denial. The bracelet slipped again in my trembling hand, its ridges pressing deep marks into my skin. I squeezed until my knuckles turned white, until pain shot up my arm. Pain was real, and so was that sound I had heard. "Listen," I shouted, my voice breaking through the whispers. "Listen, all of you." But the room drowned me out, voices rising like a wave against me. My daughter-in-law smirked, confident. She thought she had won. But deep inside that coffin, I knew there was movement, a whisper, a breath, proof the world refused to see. And I wasn't about to give up, not when my son was still calling me back. I stepped forward again, ignoring her grip, ignoring the gasps. I placed both hands on the coffin lid. My pulse thundered in my ears. The truth was under my palms. And then, silence fell. The kind of silence that freezes blood. I heard it again, clearer this time. The faintest sound rising from the coffin. A sound no one could ignore anymore. The sound of life, trapped inside the box they wanted to bury forever. The room spun the moment I pressed my palms to the coffin. My skin tingled against the polished wood, and my chest burned with urgency. I wasn't imagining it. I wasn't delirious. There was movement, life clawing for air beneath that heavy lid. I pounded the coffin with my fists, the hollow thud echoing like a drum of war. "He's alive!" I shouted, my voice raw, tearing through the whispers. The guests gasped, recoiling as if my desperation were contagious. But I didn't care. I would break that box apart with my bare hands. The widow lunged, clutching my arm with claws disguised as manicured fingers. "Stop this!" she screamed, her face twisting with fury. "You're humiliating yourself. You're humiliating me." Her words dripped with poison, but her fear betrayed her. She knew I was right. She knew he wasn't gone. The priest tried to intervene, his voice booming. "Harold, enough!" But even his authority trembled. His eyes flicked to the coffin, just for a second, doubt flickering across his face. He had heard it too. He just didn't want to admit it. Not in front of her. I slammed my palm again against the lid. "Listen," I roared, veins bulging in my neck. "Don't you hear it? Don't you see?" The silence that followed was suffocating. My breath came in ragged bursts, sweat trickling down my temples. And then, salvation. A small voice, trembling with fear, broke through the crowd. "I saw it," my nephew whispered, his eyes wide, his little finger pointing to the coffin. "I saw his chest move." The boy's words struck the crowd like lightning. Gasps, murmurs, shifting feet, the room no longer certain. For a moment, hope shimmered in the air. A fragile thread, ready to snap or hold. I reached for the child, pulling him close. "Tell them again," I urged, my voice softer. His tiny face turned toward the mourners. "He's not dead," he said. "He's breathing." But before the words could settle, her voice cut like a blade. "Delirium!" the widow spat, her laugh sharp and cruel. She stepped forward, towering over the boy. "He's just a child. What does he know of death? Nothing. Nothing at all." Her diamond bracelet clinked as she gestured, dismissing him. The crowd nodded again, swayed by her venom, by her false authority. My heart sank, watching the truth slip away beneath her lies, but I wouldn't let her destroy it. Not this time. Not when my son's life hung in the balance. I pounded again, the sound echoing through every corner of the room. "Cowards!" I roared, my voice breaking. "All of you! Too afraid to believe your own eyes. Too blind to admit the truth standing in front of you." Spit flew from my lips as rage swallowed me whole. The widow sneered, tilting her head back. "Look at him," she said, her voice dripping with mockery. "An old man lost to madness, pounding a box of wood. You should be in the ground instead of him." Laughter, nervous but obedient, rippled through her circle. Her insult seared into me, hotter than fire. My son's breath echoed in my ears, the faint rhythm that proved her wrong. I pressed my forehead against the coffin, whispering, "I'm here, son. I hear you. Don't give up." My tears stained the wood, salt mixing with polish. The boy clutched my sleeve, his eyes brimming. "Don't stop, Grandpa," he whispered. His voice was fragile, but it held courage. My chest tightened. A child's faith was stronger than all their cruelty. It gave me strength to keep pounding, to keep demanding they open the lid. The widow's voice cracked now, anger laced with fear. "Enough of this madness!" she shrieked. "You're scaring the guests." She turned to the priest, her hand trembling as she pointed at me. "Remove him! Now!" Her mask was slipping. She was desperate to end this. The priest hesitated. He looked at me, then at the boy. His lips moved as if to speak, but he swallowed his words. Cowardice pinned him to silence. The crowd shuffled uneasily, torn between the widow's command and the truth clawing at their ears. I raised the bracelet high, my hand trembling but steady enough to draw every eye. "This was his," I said, my voice hoarse but burning with conviction. "This touched his skin. This felt his pulse. And I swear to you, he is not gone." My hand shook as I lowered it back against the wood. The widow's fury flared hotter, her eyes gleaming with hatred. "You shame his memory," she spat. "You shame this family." She stepped close, her perfume suffocating, her whisper acid in my ear. "You will regret this." Her threat chilled me, but my rage burned hotter. The coffin trembled beneath my hands, or maybe it was me. But then, there it was again. A thump. Soft, hollow. Not from me. From inside. My heart nearly exploded, my knees buckling. I gasped, clawing at the lid. "He's fighting! He's fighting!" The crowd erupted, voices clashing, fear and disbelief rising like fire. Some shouted for calm. Others leaned closer, pale and trembling. The boy clung tighter to me, his face pressed into my coat. "Don't let them stop you," he whispered. "Don't let them." I tried to lift the lid, but her hand slammed it shut again, stronger than I expected. "No!" she shouted, her face flushed with panic. "You will not!" She turned to the guests, her eyes wild. "It's grief! It's madness! Do not listen!" Her words were frantic now, brittle, but the coffin spoke louder. Another sound, a scrape, a muffled groan. The silence shattered. Gasps filled the room, louder this time, undeniable. They had heard it. They could not unhear it. My son was in there, alive. I stared into her eyes, watching the color drain from her face. Her mask cracked, fear seeping through her painted calm. She knew the truth had broken free, and nothing she said could bury it again. My fists tightened against the lid, my voice shaking the air. "Open it," I demanded. "Now." My words cut through the chaos, sharp as steel. The crowd leaned forward, waiting, trembling. The widow's lips parted, but no sound came. Her diamond bracelet slipped on her wrist, catching the candlelight as her hand shook. It clinked against the coffin, the sound sharp, final. Everyone froze, the moment suspended in air. I pushed harder, my strength rising with fury. And then it happened. A breath, clear, undeniable, escaping from within. My boy, my son, breathing. The room collapsed into chaos, voices screaming, feet shuffling. But I stood still, tears burning down my cheeks. He was alive. I had been right all along. And in that moment, one thought consumed me. If my son was breathing, then someone wanted him buried alive. Her shriek filled the funeral home, shrill and venomous, but all I could hear was the echo of that breath. My son was alive. Yet instead of joy, the widow's face twisted with fury. She wasn't relieved. She wasn't grateful. She was terrified. And that told me everything I needed to know. As the crowd buzzed in disbelief, my mind spun backward. Memories clawed at me, dragging me through years of warnings, years of pain. I had told my boy not to marry her. I had seen the greed in her eyes even when she wore white, walking down the aisle like a queen claiming her throne. Back then, I was silenced, the same way I was now. "You're jealous," she said, laughing in my face. "You can't stand another woman having his love." Her insult stung. But worse was my son's silence. He chose her side. He always did. And I lost him little by little. I remembered her parading through their new house, showing off the marble floors, the chandeliers, the cars lined in the driveway. She wore her wealth like armor, flaunting it in front of neighbors, friends, and me. Always me. I was the old man left behind, standing in a small, dusty home. She controlled everything. The finances, the decisions, even my access to my own son. I'd call, and she'd hang up. I'd visit, and she'd send me away with a polite smile that hid her contempt. Slowly, she cut me out until I was just a name, a ghost in his past. One night, I arrived unannounced. I stood outside their golden doors, listening through the crack. Her voice carried sharp and clear. "Your father is dead weight. He's nothing but a burden. When he's gone, you'll finally be free." My heart broke in silence as I turned away, unseen and unheard. From that night on, resentment simmered between us. I never forgot those words. And though my son stayed blind, bound by love or manipulation, I carried them like stones in my chest. They grew heavier with every holiday I spent alone, every birthday she kept me from. Now, standing over his coffin, I understood her better than ever. She didn't want me near him in life, and she certainly didn't want me saving him in death. Her control had always depended on silence. But his breath, faint and fragile, shattered her power. The crowd still wrestled with disbelief. Some stared at the coffin, pale as ash, others at me with wide eyes. But she didn't falter. She smiled, a thin, poisonous smile, and said, "This old man has gone too far. He dishonors the dead with his madness." Her voice wove lies like silk. I wanted to scream that it wasn't madness, that her years of lies were unraveling in front of them all. But rage clawed at my throat, threatening to choke me. So I held up the hospital bracelet instead, high in the air, letting the light catch its ridges. "He is not gone," I roared. Her eyes narrowed, her lips curling in disgust. "Still with that?" she sneered, clutching at scraps. "Maybe you should bury yourself with it." The insult stabbed deep, but I clenched my fist tighter. Every cruel word only proved how much she feared the truth. I turned to the guests, desperate. "How many of you saw it? How many of you heard it?" A murmur rippled through the crowd, weak but growing. Doubt was seeding in their hearts, and doubt was all I needed. Doubt meant the spell she cast was breaking. The boy stepped forward again, his little hand shaking. "I saw him breathe," he said bravely. I did. The room grew quiet, His voice was too pure to dismiss, too innocent to corrupt. Even the cruelest among them hesitated. Her mask cracked for the briefest moment. Her glare at the child was sharp enough to cut. "Sit down!" she snapped, her voice dripping with venom. But the boy didn't move. He held my hand instead, his courage spilling into me like fire. I squeezed his small fingers, anchoring myself in his truth. Every insult she'd ever thrown came flooding back. Dead weight. Fool. Nothing. Words meant to strip me of power, to silence me forever. But today, they did the opposite. They fanned my fury. They reminded me of every stolen moment, every forced distance from my son. I leaned closer to her, my voice low, trembling with rage. "You tried to erase me from his life, and now you want to erase him from mine. But I won't let you. Not this time." My words made her flinch, just barely, but enough for me to see fear glisten in her eyes. The guests shifted again, uneasy. Their faith in her crumbled, inch by inch. Some glanced at me with something new, something that looked almost like belief. She saw it too. That's why her voice rose higher, sharper. She couldn't let control slip. "Enough!" she screeched, slamming her hand on the coffin lid. The diamond bracelet clinked against the wood, a sound too loud in the silence. "He's gone, and this madness ends now." Her face flushed red, desperation breaking through her polished mask. But the sound came again. A groan, a scrape, a weak, muffled thump from inside. It silenced her, silenced everyone. My son was speaking through the coffin, and his voice tore her lies apart. The room froze, breaths held tight. I pressed my ear against the wood, tears flooding my eyes. "I hear you, son. I hear you," I whispered. My heart beat in rhythm with his faint struggle, and for the first time in years, I felt closer to him than I ever had. Her hands shook now, the diamond bracelet rattling against her wrist like chains. Her lips trembled as she tried to speak, but no words came. The crowd stared at her, suspicion spreading like wildfire. Her empire of lies was crumbling. I turned slowly, meeting every gaze in the room. "Do you hear him now?" I asked, my voice carrying weight. No one answered, but no one looked away. They had heard. They couldn't deny it anymore. The widow's mask shattered at last. Her smile twisted into rage, her eyes burning with hatred. "If you open that coffin," she hissed, "you'll regret it until your dying breath." Her threat hung heavy, her perfume choking the air between us. But I didn't flinch. My hand pressed flat against the wood, my other clutching the bracelet. The room buzzed, waiting, trembling on the edge of truth. My son's life pulsed beneath my palm. And then, his fingers scraped against the inside again, stronger this time. A sound no one could mistake. A sound of life refusing to die. Gasps erupted, people clutching their mouths, stepping back in shock. And I knew, at that very moment, the coffin could not stay closed another second. Because my son was alive, and the woman who claimed to love him wanted him buried, breathing. I lunged forward, gripping the coffin with both hands. My strength came not from age, but from rage, from a father's refusal to let his son be smothered alive. My fingers dug into the polished wood, and before anyone could stop me, I shoved the lid upward with every ounce of power left in me. Gasps exploded across the room, high-pitched, sharp, disbelieving. The widow screamed, her voice cracking like glass. "No! Don't you dare!" she shrieked, but it was too late. The lid groaned open, and the impossible truth revealed itself. There, his hand, my son's hand, trembling, twitching against the white satin lining. His fingers curled weakly, a spark of life that silenced every whisper, every denial. The room froze, stunned into silence. My heart nearly collapsed from the force of relief. The widow's cry pierced the air again, but this time it was wild, feral. "He's not alive!" she shrieked. "It's nerves! It's nothing! It's—" Her excuses spilled like broken glass, cutting her as much as the rest of us. She couldn't unmake what we had all seen. I dropped to my knees beside him, clutching his cold hand in mine. "I'm here, son," I whispered, tears streaming down my face. His skin was chilled, but there was warmth beneath it, faint but undeniable. He squeezed back, weak, but real. The entire world tilted in that single moment. The priest staggered backward, his prayer book slipping from his hands and falling with a heavy thud. The guests murmured, some crossing themselves, others covering their mouths in horror. Their faces told me everything. They had seen it too. I wasn't mad. I never was. "Call a doctor," I roared, my voice cracking. "Get someone, now!" But no one moved fast enough. Fear and shame held them back. It was the widow who reacted first, her hands trembling as she pointed at me. "He's insane! He's dangerous!" she screamed. Her words fell flat against the truth lying in front of them. The boy, my brave little nephew, pushed through the crowd and ran to my side. "I knew it!" he cried, clutching my arm. "I told you all. He's breathing." His innocence shattered the last of their doubt. The guests no longer looked at me with pity, but with terror at what they'd nearly allowed. The widow's face twisted with rage, her beauty cracking into something monstrous. "You don't understand," she wailed. "This changes nothing. He'll die anyway. He was supposed to—" She cut herself off too late. Her words dangled in the air like a noose around her neck. I snapped my head toward her, my grip tightening on my son's hand. "Supposed to what?" I demanded, my voice trembling with fury. Her silence betrayed her. The room turned colder, suspicion thickening like smoke. Every eye now bore into her, peeling back the lies she'd lived behind. I looked back down at my boy. His lips parted, just barely, the faintest sound escaping. My heart slammed against my ribs. "Water," I croaked. "Someone get water." Still, no one moved quickly enough. Fear chained them in place, as if they'd rather pretend nothing had happened. The widow clutched her diamond bracelet, twisting it around her wrist until it cut into her skin. "This is madness," she spat, trying to regain control. "Do you really think he'll survive? Do you really think this means anything?" Her arrogance faltered with every word. But arrogance couldn't erase the truth. My son's chest rose, small, shallow, but a rise nonetheless. "Look!" I shouted, pointing with trembling fingers. "Look! All of you! He's breathing!" Gasps filled the room once more. Even the priest dropped to his knees, muttering prayers under his breath. Tears blurred my vision as I brushed his hair from his damp forehead. "You hold on," I whispered. "You hold on for me, son. Don't let go." My voice cracked with desperation, but there was fire in it too, the kind that would burn down every lie around us. The widow staggered back, her composure crumbling. "You're all fools," she screamed. "He's as good as dead. Don't you see? He'll never come back." Her words betrayed her panic. She knew her world was falling apart. Every syllable dug her grave deeper. One of the guests finally broke free of fear, running for the doors. "I'll call the hospital," she cried. Others began to stir, some rushing forward, some retreating in horror. The silence of denial was gone, replaced with frantic action. The boy clung tighter to me, tears streaking his cheeks. "Don't let her take him," he whispered, trembling. His words stabbed through me. The truth was clearer than ever. She hadn't wanted him saved. She had wanted him buried alive. I rose slowly, my body shaking but my voice strong. I faced her, the widow who had sneered, who had mocked, who had nearly buried my boy beneath her lies. "What did you do?" I asked, each word a blade. She stepped back, her heels scraping against the marble floor. The bracelet slipped from her wrist then, clattering against the coffin with a sharp, metallic sound. The crowd flinched at the noise. It was as if fate itself marked her guilt with that cold echo. Her eyes darted, desperate, looking for an ally in the sea of stares. But there was none. Her empire of arrogance had crumbled, leaving her exposed, trembling, cornered. I turned back to my son, my tears dripping onto his pale skin. His lips moved again, a whisper too soft to catch. I leaned closer, straining, holding my breath to hear his. His voice was faint, but alive, a thread pulling me back from despair. The room held stillness like a held breath. Every guest leaned forward, waiting, fearing, hoping. The widow clutched at her pearls, her knuckles white, her eyes wide with terror. She knew what was coming, and she couldn't stop it. And then, his lips parted once more. A sound slipped free. Not a groan, Not a sigh, but something clearer, sharper. My name. My name carried weakly through the air, but strong enough to shake the ground beneath us. The guests gasped. Some fell to their knees. My body shook with sobs, my grip on his hand unbreakable. He was alive. He was mine. And he had called for me. The widow staggered back, her face ashen, her mouth opening in silent horror. She could deny it no longer. None of them could. The truth had burst free, undeniable and eternal. I looked at her then, my voice breaking but unrelenting. "Now tell me," I said, my teeth clenched, "what were you trying to bury?" The room went dead silent, the question hanging heavy, impossible to escape. And in that silence, I knew her lies would come undone, because my son had spoken, and his first word back was mine. The moment his lips formed my name, my knees nearly buckled. For a second, the world tilted, the chandeliers above me blurring like stars. "I'm here," I whispered, my voice cracking. "I'm right here, son." His eyes fluttered beneath their lids, lashes trembling like wings fighting to open. Gasps echoed across the room. People pressed closer now, drawn to the coffin as if it were a miracle burning at its center. Some clutched crosses, others wept openly. The priest whispered frantic prayers, his voice trembling. The air smelled of wax, sweat, and fear, a holy and unholy mix. The widow backed away, her heels clicking against the marble floor. Her face was pale as paper now, stripped of its painted calm. "This changes nothing," she hissed, voice shaking. "He'll die anyway. This is just his body's last twitch." But even she didn't believe her words anymore. I leaned closer, my hand on his cheek. It was still cool, but beneath it, warmth flickered faintly, like embers refusing to die. "Breathe," I begged, my tears falling onto his skin. "Breathe for me. Stay with me." His chest rose weakly, then fell again, shallow but real. The boy squeezed my arm, eyes shining with hope. "He's coming back," he whispered. The child's belief gave me strength. I brushed my thumb over my son's cracked lips, feeling the faint tremor of life beneath them. I couldn't stop trembling. The guests were no longer whispering pity. Now their murmurs were frantic, scared, electrified. They had seen him move. They had heard him speak. They were no longer certain who to believe, but they knew something unholy had been done here. "Call an ambulance," someone shouted at last. A woman fumbled for her phone, her hands shaking. The sound of dialing broke the hush like a bell. Others gathered at the doors, trying to see outside for help. The widow's control was unraveling with every breath my son took. She lunged forward suddenly, gripping the coffin's edge. "He's dying," she cried. "Let him go. You're hurting him." Her voice cracked with a strange mixture of fury and panic. She was losing everything. Her lies, her inheritance, her mask, and she knew it. I turned my face to hers, my voice low and lethal. "I'm not hurting him. I'm saving him. Something you should have done." My words cut through her like knives, and for the first time, she flinched. I bent lower, my lips near his ear. "You hear me, son? It's Dad. You hold on. Don't you dare let go now." My fingers stroked his hair, as if touch alone could anchor him to the world. His eyes flickered again, the faintest groan escaping his throat. The crowd leaned in, straining to see. One woman gasped and whispered, "He's trying to wake up." Another crossed herself, tears streaming down her cheeks. The priest's prayer faltered as he stared at my son with something like awe. The widow straightened, clutching her diamond bracelet so tight the stones dug into her skin. "Stop this," she hissed. "Stop filling them with false hope. He'll be gone in minutes." Her voice cracked, but her nails dug into the coffin as if she could hold the lid closed through sheer will. I shifted my body, blocking her from him. My arms formed a shield, my body bent like a wall. "You stay away from him," I warned. My voice wasn't loud, but it was iron. She froze at the sound, trembling but trying to hide it. The boy let go of my sleeve and reached out to touch my son's hand. "He's warm," he whispered, awe shining in his eyes. The room gasped. Warmth, the impossible, was becoming undeniable. My son's fingers twitched beneath the boy's touch. "Breathe," I whispered again. "Come back." My tears dripped faster, landing on his lips. His chest rose, deeper now, a shuddering inhale like someone surfacing from dark water. The sound ripped through the room. Gasps followed. The widow stumbled back, her bracelet clinking against the coffin like a warning bell. "It doesn't matter," she muttered, shaking her head. "He was supposed to—" She stopped herself again, her lips snapping shut. But it was too late. Everyone had heard the slip. "What was he supposed to do?" I demanded, my voice trembling. "Die?" The word hung heavy, falling over the crowd like ash. The widow's face turned crimson, her breath ragged. The guests stared at her now, not me. Suspicion grew like fire. I turned back to my son, his lips parting again. "Dad," he whispered, weak but clear. My name again. The sound shattered me and rebuilt me all at once. I clutched his hand tighter. "I'm here," I said, my voice breaking. "I've always been here." The priest staggered forward, his eyes wide. "It's a miracle," he murmured. But even miracles had reasons. I saw it now. This wasn't fate. This was her. This was planned. She had tried to bury him alive. I glared at her over my shoulder. "You did this," I said quietly. "You and your greed." The guests turned toward her like a tide, their faces darkening. The room that once obeyed her now brimmed with judgment. Her lips trembled. "No," she whispered, but it was too soft, too late. She clutched her pearls as if they could save her. Her eyes darted to the doors, searching for escape, but there was none. My son's chest rose again, stronger, a sound between a breath and a sob. His eyes opened halfway, pupils unfocused but alive. The guests gasped as one. His gaze shifted, blurry, but it landed on me. Recognition flickered. I bent low, my forehead touching his. "I've got you," I murmured. "I'm not letting go." His hand twitched in mine, weak but steady. The boy's small palm rested over ours, a fragile bridge between generations. The widow's back hit the wall as she stumbled, her mask fully gone. Her hair clung to her forehead, her breath coming in short, panicked bursts. She had lost. She knew it. And then, with a voice like gravel and ghosts, my son whispered, "She did this." His words cracked the room like thunder. Heads snapped toward the widow. Gasps rose, sharper, louder. Her bracelet slipped, falling to the marble floor with a sound like a hammer. She stared at me, eyes wide with terror, lips forming words she couldn't say. And in that charged silence, the crowd surged closer, closing in around her. My son's weak accusation hung above her head, like a sentence waiting to be spoken aloud. The room wasn't a funeral anymore. It was a trial. And the truth had just named its first witness. The words left his lips like knives. "She did this." The room erupted. Mourners gasped. Some staggered back. Others stared wide-eyed at the widow. For the first time, she had no control of the room. Her painted smile was gone, replaced with a mask of panic. She shook her head violently, hair whipping against her face. "He's delirious," she screamed, her voice cracking. "He doesn't know what he's saying." But her shrill tone betrayed her. The guests leaned closer, suspicion flooding the silence she once commanded. I held his trembling hand tighter. "Tell them, son," I whispered, my tears soaking into his skin. His lips quivered, his chest shuddering with effort. "She told them." "Stop treatment," he croaked. Each word was weak, but each word landed like a hammer. Gasps echoed, bouncing off the marble walls. The priest's prayer book slipped from his shaking hands again. Guests pressed their hands to their mouths, eyes wide with horror. The truth was spilling out, one broken syllable at a time. The widow lunged forward, clutching the coffin's edge. "He's lying!" she shrieked. "He's hallucinating! This is cruelty! Making him speak when he's weak!" But no one moved to support her. Her empire of arrogance was crumbling. "Tell them," I urged, stroking his damp hair. His eyes, half open, locked on mine with fragile strength. "She wanted money," he rasped. "Insurance. Inheritance." She said, "Better if I die." The words cracked, but carried like thunder through the hushed room. The guests recoiled in unison. One woman gasped so loud it echoed like a scream. Another muttered, "Dear God." A man near the back crossed himself, his hands trembling. The room felt smaller, tighter, as the weight of her greed settled over us all. The widow staggered, her diamonds catching the light as if mocking her. "Lies!" she screamed. "All lies! He's confused! He doesn't know what he's saying!" But her protests grew weaker, more desperate. Her voice broke on every syllable. A man from the crowd, her own cousin, shouted, "You signed the forms! We all saw it!" The words cut through her denial like a blade. She froze, her lips parted, but no excuse came. The silence after his outburst burned hotter than fire. I turned to her, my voice steady, though my body shook. "You silenced the nurses. You pressured the doctors. You wanted him declared dead before his time." My words filled the space she could no longer control. She backed into the wall, clawing at her pearls, eyes darting like a trapped animal. "I did it for us!" she screamed suddenly, her voice cracking. "For the family! For a future without his weakness dragging us down!" The confession slipped out like poison, too quick to take back. Gasps filled the room again. Even her closest friends stepped away, their faces twisted with disgust. Her words had sealed her fate. She had exposed herself more clearly than any proof could. My son's lips moved again, his voice broken but clear enough. "She tried to kill me." His eyes rolled slightly, exhaustion pulling at him, but the words stayed in the air, undeniable. I turned to the priest. "Do you hear him now?" My voice thundered, sharp as steel. The priest's face went pale, his hands trembling as he whispered, "Yes, I hear him." The widow shook her head wildly. "No, no, you can't believe this. He's sick. He doesn't know what he's saying." He clawed at the air, desperate for someone, anyone, to side with her. But no one did. The boy stepped forward again, pointing a small finger at her. "You said he was dead when he wasn't," he said. His little voice carried more weight than hers ever could. The guests turned from her to him, their decision made. She slapped her hand against the coffin, her bracelet clanging like a chain. "I am his wife!" she roared. "I decide what happens. Not him, not his father. Me!" Her desperation twisted her voice into something monstrous. But the crowd was no longer hers. A man near the door shouted, "Someone call the police!" The widow's eyes widened, her control shattering entirely. She spun toward the doors, but the guests closed in, blocking her escape. The air thickened with rage, justice hanging in the balance. I rose slowly, still clutching my son's hand, and glared at her. "You almost buried him alive," I said. My voice shook, but the fury behind it was unshakable. "And you thought no one would ever know." She tried to speak, but her throat closed. Sweat gleamed on her skin, her chest heaving with panic. Her diamonds sparkled mockingly as her empire of lies fell around her. My son's hand twitched again, his lips parting one more time. His whisper was faint, but sharp enough to cut. "She wanted me gone." The words echoed in every ear. Impossible to deny. A siren wailed faintly in the distance, growing closer, louder, like a drumbeat of fate. The guests shifted, their eyes locked on the widow. She clutched her pearls tighter, trembling. I stood taller, my hand gripping the coffin like a weapon. My voice rang out above the chaos. "You tried to steal his life for money, but the truth is out, now." And then the doors burst open. Uniforms stormed in, their footsteps pounding the marble floor. The crowd gasped, parting as officers entered, their faces set and cold. The widow froze, cornered, her mask shattering completely. She looked at me, hatred burning in her eyes, but fear drowning her words. And in that heavy silence, the officer's voice cut through. "Ma'am, we need you to come with us." The crowd erupted into murmurs, gasps, shouts. And I knew, as the cuffs glinted under the chandelier light, that justice had finally arrived to drag her empire of lies into the ground. The clink of handcuffs echoed louder than the priest's bells ever had. Gasps filled the chapel as the officers gripped her arms, pulling her back from the coffin. Her eyes blazed with fury, her voice screeching through the marble halls. "This is a mistake! He's mine! You can't take me!" The crowd surged closer, their whispers turning into shouts. "Murderer!" someone spat. "Greedy witch!" another cried. The once sympathetic faces that obeyed her now twisted into masks of disgust. She shrank beneath their glares, though she still tried to sneer, still clung to arrogance like a drowning woman to driftwood. I stayed by my son's side, clutching his weak hand, feeling the fragile warmth return. "You're safe now," I whispered, though my chest still trembled with rage. My tears dripped onto his wrist, mixing with the faint pulse I felt beneath his skin. That rhythm was more powerful than any sermon. The officers dragged her across the marble, her heels screeching like knives. She twisted, clawing at the air, desperate to cling to something, anything. "He was supposed to die," she shrieked. The words silenced the entire room. Her confession ripped from her throat like a curse. The priest staggered, his cross slipping from his fingers. The guests recoiled, their eyes wide with horror. No more denial, no more doubt. The truth was laid bare, dripping venom from her own mouth. She hadn't wanted to save him. She had wanted to bury him alive. My grip tightened. "You won't touch him again," I said, my voice low but unshakable. She locked eyes with me as the officers yanked her arms behind her. Her diamonds sparkled as if mocking her, a final reminder of her greed. And then the cuffs snapped closed. The boy tugged at my sleeve, his small face pale but defiant. "She can't hurt him now, Grandpa," he said, his voice trembling but steady. His courage gave me strength. I bent down and kissed his hair. "No, son, she can't." The widow screamed again, her voice cracking into something animal. "He's weak! He won't live! You'll see! I was right!" Her words bounced off the walls, but they no longer held power. They were the shrieks of a broken woman losing everything. I turned back to my son. His eyes fluttered, unfocused but aware. "Dad," he rasped. The single word silenced the chaos around me. I bent low, tears streaming. "I'm here," I whispered. "I'll never leave you again." The officers dragged her toward the doors, the crowd parting like waves. Some spat at her feet. Others hurled curses. She no longer looked like a widow, no longer a queen of diamonds. She looked small, pitiful, a shell of arrogance stripped bare. As she passed, she twisted her neck toward me, her voice a venomous whisper. "This isn't over." Her words slithered into my ears, but I didn't flinch. I held my son's hand tighter, my rage a shield. "Yes," I muttered. "It is." The doors slammed shut behind her, and silence swallowed the room. The faint sound of my son's breathing filled the space, fragile yet stronger than all her shrieks. His breath was the sound of survival, of hope clawing its way out of the grave she had dug. Guests began to weep, some falling to their knees. Others whispered prayers of forgiveness for doubting me. Their eyes, once heavy with pity, now carried guilt and shame. They had believed her lies. They had almost let her bury him alive. The priest rose slowly, his face pale, his hands shaking. This was no miracle of death," he murmured. "This was the triumph of truth." His voice broke, but his eyes finally looked at me with respect instead of doubt. I brushed a strand of hair from my son's damp forehead. "You're not alone anymore," I whispered. His lips quivered, a faint smile forming. His weak fingers squeezed mine again. That squeeze was worth more than 1,000 apologies. The boy leaned in, his voice hushed. "Will he be okay?" I looked down at my son, then back at the child's fearful eyes. My heart ached, but I nodded. "Yes, because we'll fight for him now, together." The ambulance's siren wailed closer, the sound like salvation breaking through the night. Relief spread through the guests, though guilt still weighed on their shoulders. They had watched, they had doubted, and yet my son had lived. The officers returned briefly, nodding at me. "She'll face charges. Fraud. Attempted murder," one said quietly. The words felt heavy, but they brought no joy. Only justice. Cold. Necessary justice. I nodded once. "Make sure she pays for every moment she stole from him." My voice shook with restrained fury. They bowed their heads and stepped aside as the paramedics rushed in. They leaned over my son, checking his shallow breaths, the faint flicker of life still burning in him. Machines beeped, hands moved quickly, but I didn't let go of his hand. I wouldn't again, not for anyone. The widow's shrieks still echoed in my head, but they were fading, drowned by the sound of machines, by the whispers of relief, by the rhythm of my son's fragile breaths. She was gone, her empire shattered, The guests began to leave in silence, heads bowed, whispers trailing. None dared look me in the eye. They knew their silence had nearly killed him. Their shame would follow them long after this night. I sat by the coffin-turned cradle, holding my son's hand as the paramedics lifted him gently. His fingers clung to mine, reluctant to let go. "I'll be with you," I whispered. "Every step, every breath. I'll never let them silence you again." The boy held onto my coat, eyes fixed on my son. His courage was small but fierce, a flame in the storm. Together, we followed the stretcher out, leaving the shattered chapel behind. But just as we crossed the threshold, one of the officers hurried to my side. "Mr. Harold," he said gravely, handing me a sealed envelope. "She left this behind. For you." I froze, my heart pounding. My hand shook as I reached for it. The paper crackled, heavy, ominous. Inside that letter lay another truth, one she had wanted me to see only after she was gone. And as the doors closed behind us, I knew her story wasn't finished yet, because the widow's final weapon still waited in my hands. The envelope burned in my palm as if it carried her venom inside. My breath shook, torn between ripping it open or throwing it into the fire. My son lay weak on the stretcher, his breaths shallow but steady. Nothing mattered more than him. Still, the letter demanded to be read. I tore the seal, the sound sharp and final. The paper inside was neat, her handwriting curled and perfect, as cold as her smile. "If you're reading this, old man, then you think you've won. But know this, I never lose. Even if I go down, I'll drag you with me." My chest tightened, but I read on. "Your son was never strong. He was mine to control, mine to end. Don't fool yourself into thinking you saved him. He'll be gone soon, and so will you. Enjoy this fleeting illusion of victory." My hand shook with rage. I crumpled the letter, the paper crunching under my fist. But then I looked at my son, his pale face turned toward me, lips trembling with life. Her words meant nothing now. She had lost. She had underestimated the strength of love, of blood, of truth. The ambulance doors slammed shut, engines roaring to life. I climbed inside, clutching his hand as the siren wailed. My tears blurred the flashing lights outside. I whispered again and again, "You'll be safe. You'll live. I won't let her take you from me." As we sped through the night, memories flooded me. Birthdays missed, calls unanswered, doors slammed in my face, years stolen by her manipulation. My son had been alive but unreachable, locked behind her lies. Yet here he was, alive still, reaching back for me now. He opened his eyes fully at last, watery and unfocused, but they landed on me. "Dad," he whispered, the word fragile but whole. My heart cracked open. I brushed his hair back, smiling through tears. "Yes, son, I'm here. I'll always be here." The paramedics worked around us, their voices urgent but calm. Machines beeped in steady rhythm, every sound a promise of survival. I held his hand tighter, not in fear but in certainty. He wasn't leaving me again, not while I still breathed. The boy sat beside us, his small hands folded tight. "See," he said softly, "you saved him." His words pierced me, not with pain but with pride. For years I had been called mad, foolish, dead weight. But in the end, love had been the only truth. The city lights streaked past the windows, the sirens screaming into the night. Inside, I whispered a vow I had carried in silence for years. No more distance, no more silence. From this day, we rebuild. My son's weak smile was answer enough. At the hospital, doctors rushed him into a ward, machines and voices surrounding him. I stayed just outside, pressing my forehead to the cold glass, watching the life I had nearly lost fight its way back. My tears fell freely, but this time they were not bitter. Hours passed. Nurses moved in and out. I waited, gripping the shredded hospital bracelet I had kept safe. Its plastic edges dug into my skin, anchoring me to the moment. This was the symbol of truth, the proof I had carried when no one else would listen. Finally, a doctor stepped out, his eyes tired but steady. "He's stable," he said. "It will take time, but he'll live." My knees nearly buckled. Relief flooded me like water breaking a dam. I pressed my face into my hands, sobbing with gratitude. I walked into the room, quiet, reverent. My son lay pale but alive, wires tracing his breath, machines humming his survival. I sat by his bed and took his hand again. "Rest now," I whispered. "Your fight is over. Mine will continue." Because she would face justice. The widow's empire of lies was ashes now, her diamonds worthless against the weight of her crimes. She would sit in a cold cell, stripped of control, stripped of power, stripped of him. But for me, for us, it was a beginning. I leaned close to my son, pressing my lips to his forehead. "We have a second chance," I said softly. "We can live the years she stole from us. We can build again." His eyes flickered open, wet with tears. He nodded. The boy slipped inside the room then, clutching a drawing he had made. A simple picture. Me, my son, and him, hand in hand, standing in the light. I took it, my heart breaking and healing at once. "Family," he said. And he was right. The hospital lights hummed above, but inside the room was peace. The machines no longer sounded like fear. They sounded like hope. Every beep was another promise of time given back to us. I thought of her letter again, her venomous words. She claimed victory even in chains, but the truth was plain. She had lost. She hadn't buried him. She hadn't buried me. She had only buried herself. I tore the letter one last time, letting the pieces fall into the trash. Her threats meant nothing now. Her story ended where ours began again. Love had cut through her lies, stronger than any diamond she flaunted. I leaned back, closing my eyes, listening to the sound of my son's steady breath. It was the sweetest sound I had ever known. The sound of survival, the sound of justice, the sound of love refusing to die. The boy climbed into my lap, and together we sat in silence, watching over the man we both loved. My son, his father, his uncle, his blood. We were whole again. Morning light streamed through the blinds, golden and soft. A new day had come. A second chance had been given. I whispered a prayer of thanks, not for miracles, but for truth, for the strength to hold on when no one believed, because hope is never foolish. Love is never weak, and a father's heart sees what the world refuses to see. And so we began again, just a father, a son, and a promise that nothing, no lie, no greed, no cruelty, would ever bury us alive again. Tell me, what would you have done if you were in my place? Would you have fought until the end? Or would you have stayed silent like the rest?